I think that a lot of people, they think that there's some new problems that we're facing in democracy, and that's where people get caught up in the technology or things that look different. I tend to think the problems we face are the same ones we've always faced, which is that some people want democracy and some don't. The right wing has only ever tolerated democracy. Their actions have usually been to reinforce those groups within civil society who are fundamentally anti-democratic. And we've had breakthroughs, we've had them on the ropes, we forced them to concede, but that is not the same as agreeing to be part of a democratic experience. And so what we're seeing right now is an enormous movement forward on the right. The gravest threat to democracy is the same thing it's always been, which is the wealthy. Right? The wealthy are a grave threat to democracy because they will pursue their interests single-mindedly. And when we look at the pattern of behavior over the last few decades, things like the Panama Papers, which the papers will report on for a week and then let fall off the table. That indicates the way in which the wealthy are literally hoovering up society's surplus and preventing governments from being able to do the things their citizens want. So those are the challenges, right? Naming, why can't we do what we want with the democratic instruments that we have? This is why. I think right-wing populism, it's interesting how it fits into various narratives. We have become accustomed to sort of a conventional approach to opposition within capitalism, which is fairly neutral on those naughty questions, immigration, liberal social issues. Capitalists aren't interested in that. They'll make money off it, either way. But they would prefer that we stick to the main purpose, which is making money. And right-wing populism is itself a manifestation of the limits of our democratic experience. The democratic experience, as we know it, our actually existing democracy, if you will, is incredibly shallow. You give people a vote once every 4 years for two parties that are not really that different. Right. Wow, pretty profound democratic experience. And so not surprisingly, nobody is very happy with it. And the right and people on the right find themselves constrained in terms of how they can talk about things. Sometimes that's rightfully so. We do want to constrain some of the more obnoxious things that some of those groups might say. But in other cases, you end up with people on the right who have not had the opportunity to build up their capacities to participate in a discussion and feel comfortable doing so. Those people could easily not be on the right if the right sort of space were available for them to really take up the issues that people are arguing about: gender, race, sexuality, things that they're uncomfortable with, but who knows? If a safe space for them were created, maybe they would come to different conclusions. But because those spaces are curtailed or limited, certainly through conventional media, which is what they consume, they just rail against it. So I think in a way the right-wing populism is also a manifestation of this problem of democracy, that our democratic spaces are not deep, they are not profound. And so the answer is, and it may be uncomfortable, to open up those spaces. Create spaces for people to be able to confront these ideas, things that they're uncomfortable with. Because one thing we know about social change is that when people meet people who are different, when they are exposed to people who are different, they're much more likely to open their minds and their hearts to them than if they don't. So I think our interest is always to solve the problem of democracy with more democracy. And I realize that, for some on the progressive left, this is an uncomfortable thing because they don't want to hear it. They don't want to create a space for some of those discussions. But in a way, we have to go through it. It's part of the work. I think the most obvious is to reveal it and to continue to underline that the problems aren't that, some folks in the Midwest, American Rust Belt have got some bad ideas. Putting the emphasis there is really missing the forest for the trees. We can have a robust discussion with people about their problems, about what they think should happen, if we can open the space. But to open the space means we have to challenge those who are closing it off. And they are incredibly powerful. I mean, I think one of the most important contributions of the Occupy movement is to give us a name, give us a way of understanding just how powerful the powerful are. The idea of the 1% or the 1% of the 1%, people really have a difficult time grasping how phenomenally wealthy these people are, and then how that wealth manifests in power, how it gives them influence over governments or over the whole process of reproducing our society. In a way, it's not so much about what we call it or what it appears to be characterized as. To me, it's about the balance of class forces, and it has to be a mass thing. Part of the historic left, what protected the left, which never got any positive press, was never part of the dominant discourse, but nonetheless saw millions of people come out, millions of ordinary people with no education, no privilege, nonetheless come out and support them. It was precisely because there was a mass connection between the ideas and the people. Things like Occupy are great at disrupting the conventional understandings of what it's okay to talk about. They are magnificent at disrupting the agenda, right? Opening up the space for new topics. But that can only be the beginning. The next steps have to be to take these discussions into a mass arena. So to me, the real challenge for the progressive left is not to have the right idea or the right process, but how can we connect the open discussion that we want to have with the people who so desperately need it? You take something like 9/11. 9/11 happened, and suddenly everybody wanted to talk about it. Ordinary folks down at the shopping center, they all wanted to talk about it, but there was no real space other than talk radio for them to do it. It seemed to me that was a missed opportunity for the left. That was an opportunity for the left to say, let's set up meetings in the local gym and have people come down and let's talk about what happened here. Because none of us like the idea of people getting killed. That's just anathema to our sense of humanity. So that to me is our real challenge. A left that is small and narrow and internally discussing, a left that's like a hipster brand, that's going to fail. Because the battle is never to come up with the perfect idea. There's lots of great ideas out there. We don't suffer for lack of great ideas. What we suffer for is a way to connect those ideas to the great mass of people that will actually allow those ideas to amount to something. Because it's only with a mass of support that you can protect yourself against the formidable enemies of democracy.